Hey, what's up, everyone? So I have two special guests today, Demi and Adrian. And the reason why I really wanted to do an episode about cults and Scientology, okay, this is going to sound a bit crazy, but after watching the Barbie movie, like I actually enjoyed the film from like a cinematic experience, but it really sparked like an interest on how like mainstream media tries to force certain messaging in certain things. And then I kind of went down a rabbit hole of like just researching like a bunch of things that have happened in history and in our current society. And yeah, then I stumbled upon cults, and I did a little research on like Nixium and like Scientology, and like it just really sparked my interest. So when we spoke about it prior, I was like, we have to do an episode about this because it's so fascinating. Like, I'm so intrigued. So yeah, like, how are you guys today?
Doing good, thank you.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, so Adrian, when does a cult, or when does a religion become a cult?
It's a very good question. I think that it can go either way. I think a cult, if we had to essentialize it, is something that you cannot escape, whereas modern organized religion, at least the three big Abrahamic religions, are not that much endowed. So there are Christians and Muslims and Jews in this country. They can choose to go wherever they want, marry whoever they want. But I don't think cults do that. If cults are very insular, David Koresh in Texas is a good example, or Jamestown in Guyana, the People's Temple, are good examples of how you cannot leave. And then of course Scientology, which we'll talk about later.
Okay, awesome. So what would you say are like certain traits of a cult, like in your opinion?
I think it's having a deterministic being that there is only this way, there is no other way. So cults don't necessarily need to be in religion. You can also have it in politics or in nationalism, stuff like that, where there is no other option. There is only this option. I think that's basically, you require that for a cult, I think.
All right. Okay. So Scientology is obviously interested in like the working class people, or people that produce or have jobs so that they can, obviously take money from them, which we've obviously seen on like videos and like testimonials that people have said. So I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think like the ultimate agenda of Scientology is, compared to like when L. Ron Hubbard created it, to now David Miscavige being someone that obviously is like what would you call him, like the owner? Like
The CEO.
The CEO, yeah. The CEO of Scientology. So like, what do you think the agenda was back then compared to what it is now with Miscavige obviously in power?
I think L. Ron Hubbard was a famous, person who told lies, let's say it that way. He was in the US Navy during the Second World War and lied about his career. He had a terrible history. The best resource for this is the documentary Going Clear, which is available on YouTube. A documentary about Scientology and the life of L. Ron Hubbard. I think that he wanted to be taken seriously. There was a part of it about money, but it was far more about, let's say, personal development of himself. He wanted to be taken seriously outside of his life. He was a science fiction writer, he was a prolific writer, wrote over 1,000 science fiction stories, but then wanted to be taken seriously by psychology, and wasn't, in his book Dianetics, which came out in 1950. And then he had always previously said that he wanted religion. He had known religion, at least in the United States. You can keep the money that you make. And then I think he married these two. His disdain for psychology, for the psychological community in America, for disdaining him or saying that he was wrong, as well as this idea of that. He was also far more media literate. A lot of people took him very seriously. There were a lot of across the world, in Britain, for instance. He did a lot of interviews, and didn't hide away from the public as much as he did from the eyes, the tax authority. I think David Miscavige is far more regarding powers. Again, not really money, because as is mentioned in the Going Clear documentary, both L. Ron Hubbard and David Miscavige could just run away with the money. Yeah. They have all this money and they could make off with it, but they're not, and I think there is an element of power, and also to be taken seriously, which has a deep psychological sort of the insecurity that they may have come from.
Yeah, it's just super fascinating to see. Like, obviously I watched the documentary as well, and then you kind of see L. Ron Hubbard creating something in a way to like evade tax. Because he figures out that like that's the like having a religion is the only way that you won't have to pay tax and the government doesn't take all of your money. So yeah, that brings me to my next question. So obviously in the documentary it mentions that he created a religion to evade paying tax, and then he obviously had a lot of issues with the IRS where he like was running basically for his whole life, which is crazy. So I want to ask you, like, how do you think that they get away with not paying tax? Because how do you define something as a religion? Because it's just interesting to me. Like, I was thinking about it. They don't necessarily praise a god, which is like, you know, compared to a lot of other religions where there is one source or one like power that people praise. It's more like a self-empowerment like brand. So how does the IRS even allow that? Like, how do they define something as a religion when you can clearly see it's a business? Like, they have multiple real estate like buildings across like the world, yeah, even in Johannesburg. So like, yeah.
I think that, so the reason why they get away, at least in the American context, is because of the First Amendment of the American Constitution, which is a separation of church and state as well as freedom of speech, which that's all that says in it. But if you then take that into the notions of the Supreme Court, it says, well, you cannot then, if there's a separation between church and state, that gives church, if you do tax the church, that needs to have representation, which means that you would have to recognize religion in government. So they don't do that. So if you take that further, then you say, well, the taxation then doesn't get used. And it is mentioned in the documentary that the alternative is you need to use that money to improve the lives of your members or society in general. Aaron Hubbard was famous. He sort of evaded the tax authority for a while and then flew off to the Mediterranean, where he bought a boat, old boat in the Azores, and he got his members to fix it up for him, and then sailed around the Mediterranean. Look, he also believed in past lives that he had lived. He believed he was a Phoenician prince and a Roman general. You know, it was a very essentializing of the classical antiquity in the Mediterranean, two cultures that had nothing to do with each other. and then sort of after a while, the different ports in the Mediterranean didn't want to allow him anymore, and so he had to go back to America. And then he took the boat and then snuck into Florida. He landed the boat and went into America without, you know, passing customs. But I think they got him in the end. And then what was more interesting was David Miscavige and the modern, there were twice when the IRS, I think in the early 90s and then again recently, tried to go after him. And then there was far more intimidation of the tax authority and the individual members of the IRS, which they do with their past members, people who they don't like. They intimidate them, they threaten them, and so on. That was what they got away with later. And then famously, I think in 2003, there was a huge independent, what was it, Scientologist of America in Florida, and there he says, we have now gotten rid of the tax authority. They're, you know, these evil people, and sort of demonized the tax authority, which is, you know, I don't disagree with completely. But what they were doing, it was for their own benefit and power, and not necessarily for the members, as per the American Constitution, I think.
Yeah, because I remember that that huge event that they do, and then David Miscavige was kind of bragging about like the war is over or something like that, after they were basically like almost trying to do like a smear campaign of like the IRS in order to like push them into a corner to consider Scientology as a religion so that they do avoid paying taxes, which is insane. Because I was also looking at like what they're worth currently. Is it 1.5 or 3 billion at the moment?
That's what we know of. I mean, they have significant amount of properties also that we know of, which have just accrued in value. They don't really get that much money from members anymore, as far as I know, and the membership is less. But I mean, in this country, as far as I'm aware, we have 100,000 Scientologists, meaning that they are people who have gone through they're clear. They went through the auditing process and ejected the thetans, which we can talk about later. So that technically that makes you a Scientologist. So I don't even know if those numbers are correct, but either way, those people paid for that money. So that's enormous amounts of funds, which are undeclared. We don't know.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just insane to me to even think like about the fact that a church is buying so much property. Like, I feel like, yeah, it's just crazy. Okay, so in my opinion, and obviously seeing a lot of people like speaking out about the way that they were treated, and also how basically it's a scam to take like millions of like dollars from people who like truly believe that this religion is going to be helping them. So this is a similar question to the one before, but do you feel like David Miscavige and L. Ron Hubbard like had the same intentions from the beginning? Or do you feel like Miscavige is a bit more greedy? Because I remember I told you that I feel like Miscavige is more like a tyrant. He's like you can kind of see he's like business orientated. And even though he doesn't necessarily want to like run away with the money, I feel like he has like a long-term agenda in terms of like where he wants to take Scientology. Because I was watching this interview that he did with, I can't think of the interviewer's name now, but it's
Megyn Kelly.
No, not Megyn Kelly. It was on ABC News, but like years ago. It was one of his first interviews, and like just the way that he's speaking, it's almost like he understands what he believes in Scientology basically, but you can also see that a part of him isn't fully in it the way like L. Ron Hubbard is. Like you can just see in like, I don't know. Like, what is your opinion basically?
So I think it's good if there is a cult of personality for both figures. I think far more L. Ron Hubbard because he's the founder, and David Miscavige is sort of his apostle, if you will. I think that if you compare it to other cults of personality, for instance, in the Soviet Union, you had Joseph Stalin, who was the dictator in the 1930s. He was a terrible man and did terrible things and had this cult of personality, but people were genuinely sad when he died. Whereas if you take a different character like Saddam Hussein, again, not a very nice man, but there was far less sympathy of the Iraqi people, of which he was the dictator, when he was executed. So I think if you look at it that way, David Miscavige is the Saddam Hussein and L. Ron Hubbard is the Stalin. If you look at that as a cult of personality. So I think that L. Ron Hubbard was a little bit different in that he created this idea. He was married to it. He was, like I said, far more about power, whereas David Miscavige, I think he inherited it, he saw the gap, and I think both of them at the beginning maybe didn't believe it that much. L. Ron Hubbard said so literally, it was just a racket, to like get money based on his Dianetics book. But I think both of them now, for whatever reason and measure, have believed their own nonsense, basically.
Yeah, it's just super fascinating, especially just seeing like the differences between them. I feel like they were speaking about like how David Miscavige was starting to get very paranoid, which you can kind of see a pattern with a few of the people that have, ascended to the different levels. And then obviously L. Ron Hubbard went a little bit crazy as well. And then he wanted to get rid of his executives or something like that, David Miscavige, right? And then he sent them to this place called The Hole, which like, oh my God, the stuff that they do to those people, it's actually really disgusting. Like, I saw the one where they were playing like musical chairs and they were playing Bohemian Rhapsody, and basically that one line, what was it?
Nothing really matters.
Yes. They like that was like almost like the theme and the way that they wanted to kind of indoctrinate them and say, nothing really matters. And when they thought that they were all going to be like obviously exiled from this like religion, people were scared, like they were fighting each other. And then at the end they were like, oh no, you can stay. And it's crazy how people get so, like, it's almost like a mind prison that you're in. Like, that you almost believe, like, I don't know, you just don't want to get out of it. But it's so fascinating.
I do think that if we use my similarities with the cult of personality, Stalin is more L. Ron Hubbard, because he did play people off against each other, but in a way that was deterministic at the time. Whereas you have Saddam Hussein did do things like that. He would tell his generals, go run around like that, otherwise, and the last one that does this is going to be executed. And then at the end, like, oh, none of you are being executed. So it keeps them on their toes. And I feel like David Miscavige is that sort of, unlike L. Ron Hubbard, I think, wanted belief, but emphasized in a different way. Whereas David Miscavige, the belief is not that important for his, as long as he has their loyalty or authority.
The obedience is more important than the belief. I just said the obedience is more important than the belief. He just wants to be followed and like not questioned at all. instead of like actually growing them. I think like L. Ron Hubbard wanted the people to like believe Scientology was going to help them, and like was the answer, where David Miscavige just wants them to follow him, you know, like a leader, unquestioned, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to like see the differences, and also like hearing the abuse that David Miscavige, like the way he would beat people. And then also the when you have a child in Scientology, they go to like a nursery or something, and then they kind of get indoctrinated from. So there's like child labor, there's like exploitation of work, like, you know, working for like 4 to 40 cents or something.
40 cents an hour.
Yeah, 40 cents an hour, which is like, it's disgusting. And then, I wanted to speak to you guys about something totally off. It's on topic, but it's about Tom Cruise. So they were speaking about this actress that apparently David Miscavige wanted to set up Tom Cruise with. So they basically gave her like a makeover, like took her to, I think it was like Gucci or something, and then like dyed her hair, and then basically like set her up with Tom Cruise, which is like a bit creepy in a way, especially what's happening now in the world in terms of like human trafficking. It's like why are people setting people up? And then the way that she was treated in the end as well, like
she was punished, right? Like she had to scrub the bathroom. She had to scrub the bathroom floors with like a toothbrush, and she explained also in the Going Clear documentary that like people she knew that she thought were friends were like walking over her, just watching her like scrub the floor, because they obviously had believed she went against Scientology for speaking about how she was treated and whatever. So she was seen as a traitor to them, even though they were friends and knew each other for so long. And it was just crazy, like the hair and everything was done to like Tom Cruise's specifications, and it was just after I think him and Nicole Kidman split, right? So then he needed like another person on his arm, I guess. And yeah, like it's a shame. She was working in, I can't remember what country it was, but also like already in Scientology, and then they decided like she's gonna go on like a special mission. She signed the contract and whatever, and the mission was to be Tom Cruise's girlfriend, and she didn't really know this until she was brought to him and then told like, oh, you guys are like, it's an arranged marriage, which I think arranging marriages or relationships is very common in cults and religion, because it's like a marrying of power almost, or like elevates your status and that, and like fortifies the connections within, you know, everything. So but yeah, it's just wild that they thought they could just take a person and make her almost into a prop, and like that's a whole person, her, like you can't just do that.
No, but like if you think about it as well, like when he was with Nicole Kidman, apparently there was like a part where like he wasn't as involved in the cult. I'm gonna call it a cult, like as much, because it wasn't her dad like a well-known psychologist or psychiatrist, and like he didn't like that, David Miscavige.
Well, the first it was they met. I can't remember. It was a car movie. It was a movie where that's where he met Nicole Kidman, and David Miscavige wasn't happy about it because her father was a famous psychologist in Australia, where she's from. But it was all okayed in the end, and they got married. What I find very funny is one of my favorite directors is Stanley Kubrick, and he brought Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise while they were already married and shot Eyes Wide Shut, which is a interesting film. And then what was hilarious is that he was in London, and there was. It's stated that like basically Tom Cruise was taken away from this sort of Mephistopheles and taken away to like another crazy person was controlling, in the Stanley Kubrick being that person, and David Miscavige was jealous and like used to like try and find out as much information about what's going on, because Stanley Kubrick kept them there for I think a year or two, like the shooting of Eyes Wide Shut. So it's just I just find it funny that like this man who had been created, Tom Cruise, by David Miscavige to be controlled, when he lost control to another domineering figure, then he became jealous. I think that's it's almost like a humanistic term. Like it makes David Miscavige more human, other than the other information in the documentary, I feel.
Yeah, agreed. Because like he does kind of seem inhumane, like a robot. Yeah, like a robot. Okay, so let's talk about why they love recruiting celebrities, specifically like having someone as famous as Tom Cruise, John Travolta. I know Leah Remini was in it, and she was on that show King of Queens, which I loved. And like why do you think that recruiting celebrities is such like a thing for them? Like why do you think they need more like influential people as part of like their cult?
So I think it's it's a two-way street between celebrities and Scientology. I think a lot of celebrities, Paul Haggis, who's a writer-producer, he was also interviewed for this, as well as Jason Beggy. Both of them have now lapsed. They're no longer members of Scientology. And both of them speak about how their careers ascended when they joined Scientology. And that could be that they felt better, or that this religion or cult or psychology or whatever made them feel better and turned them into better people, made them work better. Or it could be that Scientology, which is very much invested in Hollywood, two of their biggest properties are in Hollywood, in the actual area of Hollywood of Los Angeles, or that they are busy determining the film industry like they do in many other things, for instance the internet. I do then think that Scientology does this because it basically creates, I don't want to say it's a class distinction, but it's a hierarchy. So you have Tom Cruise, who doesn't have to scrub boats and whatever and work for 40 cents an hour, and he is the marketing, he's the draw, basically. Like, if you want to join Scientology, John Travolta is a member, Tom Cruise, all of these people, big stars, So if they're doing it, and look how well they're doing, therefore I should join this. And then you end up not being an actor, you end up scrubbing boats for 40 cents an hour.
Yeah, it's just crazy as well, because a lot of those actors also spend millions of dollars, because obviously they can afford it, into investing into the church. I know that Leah Remini mentioned that when she was taken to that rehabilitation camp thing, which I'll talk about later, I think it costed her $50K just for them to try and indoctrinate her again. And it's just crazy how much money gets used on this type of religion. Okay, so why do you think John Travolta can't or won't leave? So the reason why I'm asking this question is because in the documentary, I first thought that he was brainwashed, completely just oblivious to what's going on in the world. But then I thought to myself, maybe he can't leave because he's being blackmailed, or maybe they're using what he said in those auditing sessions against him. So because he's such a influential person in Hollywood, and he does testify at all of these lawsuits that have been against Scientology, he's basically forced to stay. So in your opinion, what do you think?
So it's shown in the documentary as well that there were allegations of him being a homosexual, and when those allegations came out, it was the early 90s. At least in America, it might have had an impact on his career. There's other issues. His son passed away at some point as well. So I think John Travolta is more interesting than Tom Cruise, in my opinion. I can see where Tom Cruise gets power and psychological help or whatever from, and also goes on wonderful holidays where Scientology members at very low pay help him and make his holiday wonderful on his birthday and all of these things. Whereas John Travolta, it seems as if there's a hilarious scene also in the documentary where he's dressed in a US Army uniform, I think for the film The General's Daughter, and then says, name me one other religion that promotes peace in the way that Scientology does, which I thought was ironic. But he seems to be a true believer. He also used his own money to make a film called Battlefield Earth, which I think came out in the 90s, in which he starred. A young Forrest Whitaker's in it as well. And which is a novel by L. Ron Hubbard that he then turned into a film with his own money. Big loss, I'm a big fan, just by the way, of Battlefield. I think it's hilarious and great. But it's very much schlock, pulp fiction, sort of science fiction, right? It's about aliens. It's again like Scientology, aliens coming to Earth and enslaving humans and that sort of thing. I encourage everyone to watch Battlefield Earth. and then I think that he's far more. I don't think, because it can't be homosexuality, if that is the reason why. I think in today's Hollywood, many actors have come out, so either he's trapped in that sort of mindset and therefore does it, or there's something else. And I in my opinion, I think it's something else. Maybe he is it's either he's a true believer or there's something deeper than homosexuality, which they're using against him.
Yeah, it's just super fascinating to think what's making him stay, especially if he knew about everything that's going on. And you guys were speaking about what was that woman's name that helped? Yeah.
So I think also a big thing is when she recruited him, she described him as feeling very lost. He was very young also at the time when his career was just taking off kind of thing, and I think obviously fame is very difficult to deal with when you've not grown up in it or whatever. But she was saying he felt very lost, or he seemed very lost, and that's why she brought him into Scientology. You'll feel like you belong and everything. That obviously he started feeling a sense of community in the space. Obviously his career took off, so I think, like Adrian said, he is a true believer because he saw for himself how this church or cult changed his life. So I think it is very much that he's just been in it for so long, and it's so deep and has such far-reaching impacts in his life personally that he probably doesn't actually want to leave. Obviously there's that sense of fear and like all of his documents and everything, but yeah, I truly believe that he wants to stay, and he feels like a sense of belonging and a purpose, and a big part of his identity is being a Scientologist at this stage, even though I don't think he's as active anymore. But I think it's just he's so too deep into it that I don't think he would want to leave even if he had the option.
Maybe he is like a true believer, especially like from what you guys were saying, because I guess it just doesn't make sense if you know so much that's been going on, or like how people are treated, that you still allow it. Okay, so Adrian, the last question for you is so like, does a religion harass you after you leave or force you to disconnect from your loved one? So I know that if you're in Scientology, for example, and you want to get out, but you have like a family member that's still in Scientology, then you're called a like suppressive person, and then you're kind of like, obviously your family that's in Scientology are forced to disconnect from you because obviously you don't want to be a part of it anymore. So like, if we're comparing it to a religion, like, does a religion harass you after you try and leave it? It's like,
so I think that there are certain sects, and the Scientology, there's only one denomination. There's not many. Whereas Christianity or Islam or Judaism, at least the three Abrahamic religions that I'm familiar with, they don't. You have Muslims in Cape Town where we live, who can marry Christians. It's quite common. You have in America, you have Jews who marry Christians also, and in South Africa. It's contextual. You have, for instance, honor killings from Central Asia and Islam, where a woman leaves her family, wants to marry, let's say, a Christian or something, and then they kill the daughter. The family will go and kill the daughter. This is not something which is endemic to Islam. Just like this happens in Christianity, it happens in Judaism. There are groups in Israel who then will attack mixed religion, like Jewish girls marrying Muslim guys, Christian guys, whatever. So I think that there's that sort of thing in all. It's not just religion as well. If you have political groups as well, if you leave it, then they will kill you, something like that. Scientology, I think, is a little bit different in that it's hegemonic. That there is no way. There's one structure, and if you leave it, there's a consistent. You are ostracized. Paul Haggis, for instance, talks about the writer producer was in Scientology, who says that he basically had to ostracize his wife's parents because they weren't, and he was not okay with that, but he stayed in Scientology while it was happening, and only after he found out about more sort of egregious things, he left, and then was harassed. There was quite a few of the executive members of Scientology who were publicly harassed. If you look at, I don't remember, Hannah Aldringham, I think is her name, the woman who worked on the ships, she was, if you just Google her name, the first 100 results are all websites, not necessarily linked to Scientology, demonizing her and so on. So I think there is a consistent, unlike other religions or even some other cults or political groups, where there's consistently, this is what will happen to you if you leave. So I think that's what makes Scientology and at least cults different.
Yeah, because I know there's something in Scientology called fair game as well. So like, if they attack you, like, you don't just like turn the other cheek, like you fight back. So a lot of the executives that were part of like Miscavige's, like, I would say, inner circle, like, obviously I saw a lot of the smear campaigns. They were calling this one guy a squirrel.
That's their term, yeah.
Yeah, and then they were wearing like all of these like this t-shirt and this hat that said like squirrel busters or something like that, which is insane. And then you could see everything in the media was like calling people out, like spreading false things about them, and just like spreading like false narratives about like these people just because they decided to leave, which is like, it's really disgusting to think like that's how people choose to treat others. But I guess like it is what it is. But also like Miscavige's dad, who left Scientology, and like his son doesn't even care, like literally, which is insane.
I think it's also so like cults in general have a very like us versus them mentality. So when you're in the cult, you're part of us, you know, our members, whatever. As soon as you become them, you're an outsider, you're a threat, even especially if you are a past member, you know things that you know it would be damaging. And they're also a very reactive cult. Like they take almost things personally. I think like if you say something bad about Scientology, it's a reflection on them as a person as well. Probably like David Miscavige, he's the main guy, he's the CEO, so anything bad about Scientology that is said is a reflection of him almost, which is why I think they do this kind of like harassment thing, kind of almost like defending themselves, but they're just very reactive. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
My brain like went off there.
It's all good. So okay, so they are like I would say two good things about Scientology. So there is an empowering element about like being a Scientologist. I feel like it does kind of give you confidence, like some of their teachings, it gives you almost an empowering feeling, like you have the confidence to like if you're an actor, like ace this audition or get this film, or like just be like achieve your highest potential because of these certain like practices. I think another great thing is so you know how they're not allowed to look at any negative articles or anything about Scientology, which is also like if you think about it, reading negative comments about yourself, like, is it really going to benefit you? Not really. So I think that element I understand, but it is a bit alarming because you're not allowing people to make the judgment themselves. So it's a bit alarming about that. But okay, so Demi, what I wanted to like ask you is, what is your knowledge about the Sea organization, which is like known as like the inner circle of Scientology?
So that kind of started when L. Ron Hubbard was trying to evade tax, and he bought the cruise ship and whatever and went all around trying to not to like get caught or whatever. So people were told that they were also going to go on like a special mission and whatever they were going. I think they were told they were going to some boat and they were expecting like a lavish cruise ship kind of thing. And I think it's Spanky Taylor. She was one of the first ones in the Sea Org, if I'm not mistaken. Or
no, it was Hannah,
yes,
her name is
sorry,
Hannah
yeah.
Davies.
And then she explains like they were taken to the ship and it was like a rusty old thing, and they had to basically do free labor to like clean this thing up, and they worked like on their hands and knees scrubbing and whatever. And then that became, I guess, kind of his first like group within Scientology, like the different like factions and whatever. And yeah, it was just like horrible conditions, free labor, and they were told like this labor and whatever was going to bring them closer to the truth, and you know, all of that kind of thing. And then it kind of became almost like a punishment to get sent to the Sea Org in a way, and they used it later on, I guess, to like reinforce the whole ideology of Scientology and everything like that. And then there was an account, I can't remember who the person was, it's also in the documentary, where her parents were like worried about her being on this cruise ship, and they would cry about it and everything, and she like truly believed that she was doing it to like better herself and better her position and everything like that. So yeah, the Sea Org, I think it started as like a sorry. It started as that whole thing of him just wanting to go around on the cruise ship to evade tax and everything, and eventually just became a way to like control members. So
yeah, it's just crazy because you guys mentioned that they earned like 40 cents an hour. I think it was between 6 to 40 cents an hour.
Something like that, no more than 40 cents an hour,
Yeah. Which is like quite insane. And then they had to sign like $1 billion contract, which is also insane. Because that's not legal, right?
Well, I think we should talk about what they believe. Paul Haggis has a wonderful explanation of this. So you go through these meters, and it begins as sort of a self-help, as you say, which it is. It works on self-help, sort of better yourself, make yourself. And then you work up these, and it's sort of, it gets mentioned as a religion, but then you don't really, you're like, oh, they're probably doing that for tax reasons, which they are. And then you go through these auditing measures, which you have to pay for. And you go through all of them. Jason Beggy at one point says he did more auditing, like he did more work in 13 years than John Travolta did, which he says he's been a member of for 85 years, which I think is hilarious. Which is shows again that sort of difference, like where you are, your hierarchy. I think so. What is revealed to you once you reach something? I think it's OT8 is the highest you can go, and then you get there, and then you have handwritten notes by Aaron Hubbard that you can see. I don't know how they do this around the world. Like, do they ship this pieces of paper around it? Maybe they photocopy it. And then there's a story about the galactic overlord Xenu, there's apparently another world which is like 1950s America. Aaron Hubbard even mentions that the DC-8, which was the highest level of technology in the 1950s, the jetliner, would then be, because there was overpopulation. And that's two things that immediately red flag for anything for me. If you talk about IQ, which apparently, if you say your IQ is going to get better because of this thing, I'm like, no, this is nonsense. I don't even have to hear anything else. And overpopulation, if that's your problem, no, you are bad people. I'm leaving you. So there was overpopulation, which Aaron Hubbard believed there was in the 1950s. And they would then, I think that's another hilarious thing. They would then be called in for tax auditing. These other people, this alien world, that was like 1950s America, and they would be and then kidnapped, and then placed onto these, and then brought to the prison colony, which was Earth, which at that point was 75 million years ago, full of volcanoes, and then be dropped in the volcanoes, and then atomic bombs would be dropped on top of them, and then that would somehow get their soul to come out. So then whenever a baby, yes, they are the Thetans, and then whenever a baby is born, a Thetan quickly slips in. And sometimes you have multiple Thetans in there. And that's also another thing which David Miscavige then had this machine made by a friend of his, which is mentioned in the documentary, to remove this Thetan, and he broke the machine. And it was just that sort of enormous, weird story. So you get to this, if you believe all of this stuff, by that, there's one woman who's the highest level. She's the highest level Scientologist ever. And you just have to think, Paul Haggis at a lower level was like, this is nonsense, but stayed. What was that woman thinking? Like, at what level did she think this is nonsense, but stayed? It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's just fascinating because, like, if you think about, like, a lot of people say when they reach, like, the highest level, they either find that it's total shit, like, or, like, they're so indoctrinated already that they blindly believe like whatever they've been taught. Like when David Miscavige was like had that period where he was so paranoid and all of that things, and then he sent his executives to that place called The Hole, and like I remember I watched the interview that their ex-wives did on Anderson Cooper's show, and they were so like it was crazy. They were defending what was happening, and they were denying that what their ex-husbands had to say was like false, like which was really insane that people blindly believe that. Okay, so let's discuss the auditing sessions. Like, so there's a thing called an e-meter, if you don't mind explaining like what that does, and then obviously like the emotional responses and reactions.
So the e-meter is kind of like a little lie detector device. It kind of works on the same principle of like reading your pulse, your sweat, your body temperature and everything like that, but not as accurate. Not that a lie detector test is accurate, but the same kind of concept. And they believe that like the meter would detect like you remembering memories of your past life. And what would happen is, I guess they would kind of like influence your feelings in this e-meter reading or the auditing sessions. And like if they saw that it was going up, it was obviously like a sign of distress, and they were like, oh my word, you must be remembering something, there must be some like deep memory that from your past life, and it would kind of like influence you to believe these kind of things. And this was like the Thetans also, you needed to clear yourself of this, and you could only do this in the auditing process, and you needed to clear yourself to become like the best you that you can be again, like that self-help kind of thing. So people kind of viewed this auditing almost as like therapy, their version of therapy in any case. And like they would make you confess to things that were obviously not true, and then they would keep files on all these things that you confessed, and basically use it as blackmail essentially. And people would have like files and files and files and like whole cabinets and everything of just like their recollections of their past lives and everything like that. So that was the main like, not activity, but like of Scientology. That's what you would do. There were people that would do auditing sessions like multiple days in a row, like for 12-hour sessions. And obviously you're sitting there under pressure. You're going to be in distress. The machine's going to pick that up. But they would view this as like you clearing yourself, getting rid of the negative thetans and all of that kind of thing. So it was very much, I would say, kind of brainwashing in a way. Like they knew kind of ways to make you feel anxious and stressed and whatever, and make you actually believe these things that you're confessing to that like did not actually happen.
Yeah, because I know that when like when they do these auditing sessions, they can basically like tell you what they think you're feeling. And I've noticed a pattern where they will ask questions like so what is going on in your life right now that's stressing you out? It's like they're looking for like certain like triggers. So when David Miscavige was on that one interview with that guy, the first question was, he asked him like is there anything in your life that you would like to improve on? And the guy's like, no, like everything in my life's perfect, love my family, love my career, all of that. And he almost like he paused for a minute because he didn't know what to say next, because like that's like a pain point that they kind of
it's actually part of their recruitment. It's part of their recruitment process of first, like, you know, figuring out what in your life needs improvement, and they use that to kind of bait you into it. So like I think it was Paul Haggis, when he went up to the Scientology guy that I think was on the street like handing out books, he said to him like, what is Scientology, whatever. And the guy was like, well, name any problem in your life and we can fix it. And then Paul Haggis was like, okay, whatever, love, like that's the issue I'm having like within my marriage. And the guy was like, no, we can fix it. Like blindly just don't know the problem, don't know the context and nothing, don't know these people, but they were like, we will fix it, we can fix it. And then I guess they found ways through these auditing sessions to kind of fix his marriage and whatever. And that's why he ended up staying in Scientology, because it was enforced on him that it works, you know, so...
Yeah, so interesting. Okay, so the next question that I wanted to ask you, okay, so they say that the different levels of Scientology is basically like you're exploring the mind of like L. Ron Hubbard, which is like the creator of Scientology. So what would you, like, what is the psychology behind Scientology? And then also, why do you feel like they're so against like therapy and psychiatry and like, yeah, just anything that has to do with like therapy in a way?
Okay. So like I think the auditing sessions at first, when you start in the auditing sessions, you have a problem, love, money, career, whatever. It might start off almost as talk therapy in a way, which is a regular therapy, whatever, but they disguise it as auditing and eventually like kind of skew it and whatever. So they use psychology a lot within Scientology because it's human nature, like the way our brains work and everything. And even if they're not aware of it, they're using psychological practices in a way, even in a negative way. So like I think the auditing is kind of like talk therapy, or that's how it starts. But Scientologists is very against psychology, because if you go deeper into all these things about the thetans and their theory of how the mind works and the body, psychology disproves that. Like there's no...
Or at least disputes it.
Yeah, disputes it. There's no proof that you have multiple souls in your body, you know, that kind of thing. So psychologists, they don't back that, you know, way of thinking about how the brain works and whatever. And like L. Ron Hubbard tried to get published in psychological journals and that, even though he was so against psychology, but it's because it could be used to disprove what he was teaching. And his book as well, like psychologists didn't think when it first came out and was this whole fad, like they didn't back it either. So I think that's where the whole thing of like being against psychologists come from, even though like a lot of it could be based within psychology, I guess, like the auditing sessions, like the talk therapy, like I'm sure it does at a lower level make you feel better, getting these things off your chest. And like they were, I think it was Spanky Taylor again that said just knowing she was having an auditing session later that day, she already felt better, her mood was already boosted. But the deeper and deeper you go in, the more intensive the auditing sessions go in, the less like talk therapy it is, and more just becomes like manipulation. So I think there's overlap, and they just use psychology in a bad way, and that's why they can't be like legitimized in the psychology space. So yeah, it's very interesting. Also, like the psychology behind cult leaders, specifically like narcissistic. That's like the main trait that I think links all of them together. They think that they're better than everyone. They lack empathy. They think they're all knowing and all of that kind of thing. So that's very interesting to look into, like the personality types between them and between cult followers. It's very similar across the board. I actually found an article of like the demographic of cults, and 70% of cults are made up of women, which is very interesting, a very interesting thing to see. Like, okay, across the board, it obviously varies between cults and between whatever. There's lots of theories of why this is. Women tend to go to more social gatherings like churches and family gatherings, so there's a higher chance of being recruited kind of thing. Also, if you think about when cults were started in the 90s or 1998 for Nixium, and like the 1960s, women didn't have as much like freedom at that time, and they were just finding ways to get into career paths and everything like that. So it targets women like that, like self-improvement, all of that kind of thing plays on that side, which again is psychology that they use in these recruitment, things. And also people with a lack of identity and everything like that, they can sometimes break down your identity completely with these different tactics that they use, fear tactics and whatever, and they rebuild you essentially. So people with low self-esteem and stuff like that, they are very easily recruited. And obviously cult leaders know this. Cult leaders I like to think of as like profilers. They're very good at profiling potential, I want to say victims, but so yeah, the psychology of cults in general, it's very interesting, and I think it can become very complex. So you would need like a whole another hour to talk about it. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Like that was it's just really interesting to think. I didn't know that a majority of women get recruited into cults. That's like
sorry. Also, another thing of that is like a tactic they use is they use other women to recruit women, because you're more likely as a woman to trust another woman. So that's also why I think that women in cults you see a lot of the accounts of abuse and that towards women, to keep them under control and that kind of thing. And that's why they do like the groundwork at the lower levels, I guess, to recruit more and more and more. And like Nixium was also a very good example of that. They were the multi-level marketing, getting women for self-improvement and all of that kind of thing. So I think that again is like psychology. A woman's gonna trust another woman more. Like, this woman would never lead me astray. Like, look how well it's worked for her, and she has a successful family and home life and all of that kind of thing. So I think that is a big reason. And if you look at it, it's also very interesting. Cult leaders are majority men. I don't actually think I know any cult where the main person is a woman. I think to go too deep into psychology, but women have been socialized to be followers a lot of the time. It goes back years and years and years and years. And again, like at the times it was being started, you maybe didn't have as much knowledge of like the workplace and who to follow and all of that kind of thing. And men were already in positions of power at that time. So it was easy for them to just gain more power as they were going, and women just ended up following, not like really knowing better at that time, however many years ago. So yeah, there's also a lot of like psychology between men and women that you could go into, but that could also become very, very complicated. So yeah, I think that's why.
Yeah, I think it's important to note the fact that, like I have noticed as well that a lot of the leaders are males, and a lot of the women are kind of used as a pawn in like the bigger scheme of things. And like we'll touch on Nixium a bit like later, but the whole thing with Alison Mack, like she was like the successful actress, like she was getting all of these roles, and then something obviously inside of her is a bit insecure, which is what gravitated her to Nixium and to that guy. Okay, so what are some of the indoctrination techniques used in Scientology, like specifically?
So I think like it's very difficult to like pinpoint, I guess, one like specific method that they use, but obviously the auditing is a big thing, and keeping you believing that these auditing sessions are going to help you, and like they just keep reaffirming the beliefs of Scientology. Again, like you can see that they have events where it looks like the Golden Globes, and like they're all dressed in like their best finery, and the way that they speak, or that David Miscavige gives speeches, it's very like authoritarian. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Like even in the documentary, they compare him to Hitler, like a lot of the time.
How he does
Exactly, like literally to L. Ron Hubbard, like a big picture of him. And yes, exactly, which is very like,
But they take it so seriously.
they really, yeah. So I think things like that, like showing of the wealth and everything that can go right in Scientology and how it can help you, and just keep reinforcing it and showing it to you, and just, propaganda. Like they're very big with their propaganda. Again, like when I Googled Spanky Taylor, who is known as a suppressive person, the first article that comes up is from freedom.org, their website. And when I went onto it, I was like, wait, but why are they speaking so badly about this person? Like I'm trying to, Google her and like see what she's about, and then I realized like, this is a Scientology like website, and I was actually like taken aback that like it would be the first article to come out, So I think just things like propaganda is a big thing. Obviously in later years, or they started punishing and all of that kind of thing. So I think they just keep you in this loop of like reinforcing. They're also a big thing that cults in general use is just like being repetitive as possible, exposing you to like the ideology as much as possible. So I think that just keeps you in that mindset. They just keep like reminding you of those kind of things.
Yeah, I noticed another tactic that they tend to use is they, because of, when you do that hard labor, you don't get much sleep.
Yeah.
And then obviously when you're like sleepy and like sleep like deprived, you're more like susceptible to be controlled and like brainwashed. Because I know like when I'm tired, like I really don't care. Like, which
you can tell me anything.
Yeah, you can just say anything. And it's crazy that they use that as like a way to manipulate people as well. So I want to discuss the rehabilitation side. The fact that they are like in a confined space, they spend about like 30 hours doing the auditing thing, I think, again, which you can talk.
Yeah, it's like labor.
Yes, hard labor. So if you just want to like touch on a bit of like how hectic the whole like rehabilitation thing is, if you are trying to get out.
Yeah. So like at one stage, I think Spanky Taylor, she was sent there, and she said she's like the main person in this, one of the main people in that documentary. Yeah. She was sent there, and at one time there was like 200 people that were kept in this space. It's the top floor of the Scientology building, the main one. And like she explained that they would sleep on dirty mattresses. They would literally work for like 30 hours on, 3 hours off, and obviously being so sleep deprived, then you could put back in that like situation doing like menial tasks, scrubbing and cleaning and whatever. And this was seen as you like, I want to say repenting almost, and like just being broken down so that they can build you back up again, I guess. And like they were separated from their children. She explained that they were fed table scraps, and now you're underfed and you sleep deprived, like the two main things that you would need to survive, So they were just kept in really, really harsh conditions. And I guess they made you believe that you were in the wrong. Like again, breaking down your self-esteem and all of that kind of thing. And the way she actually kind of escaped that whole situation was she became pregnant, and then she saw also the conditions that her child previously was being kept in. Like she explained, I have it written down, that when she went to go see her child, she was in like a urine soiled cot. She had mucus around her eyes, obviously not being taken care of, and that was when she would just like switch, and she was like, there's no way, it's like this is really wrong, and ended up getting a friend to help her escape. She convinced the like higher ups she needed to go to the doctor. There was something wrong with her pregnancy. She wrapped her child up and hid it, and whatever, met her friend at a cafe, and they just rode off. And I guess that's how she made her exit. But yeah, the whole rehab thing, I think it was very common for people that were starting to question Scientology. Like you couldn't even say to a friend like, oh, I don't think this is right, and they would go like tattle on you to whoever, and then the next thing you know, you're thrown into this rehab center. So yeah, I think it was punishment, and obviously now you're scared. You don't want to question anything. You don't want to show that you kind of rejecting Scientology, because you're going to get thrown in this rehab center. So yeah, and it's very common in cults all around to kind of, you get punished if you question anything. There's no questioning. You just need to blindly follow. So the rehab center, I think it kind of worked. It stopped people from asking questions and looking like they're becoming a non-believer or a suppressive person, and it's just really scary. Like it's slavery essentially, so very scary.
Yeah, I was just about to say that now. It's just like, I don't know, it's just kind of heartbreaking because obviously, like, one of the main issues going on in the world right now is like human trafficking, and that does sound like slavery. And I think I saw in the documentary as well that when people try to speak out about the treatment that they got, or even the beatings from like Miscavige, it was classified as church practices or something like that. So basically, like, it wasn't seen as something that people could actually like get justice on or whatever. And then also that story about Leah Remini, when she tried to like leave or was speaking out about Scientology, she went to the indoctrination thing, and then as soon as she said Tom Cruise and David Miscavige are like the savior or whatever, then they were like, okay, cool, you're done. Like, it's like they want you to be so like indoctrinated with stuff like that. It's crazy. Okay, so let's discuss like other cults. So Nixium is one that I did a deep dive on, which is super fascinating. Because obviously I used to watch Smallville, which Alison Mack starred in, and then when I saw like the rise and fall of like her career, it was like very intriguing to me, because it's interesting how people can go from being at their highest point to all of a sudden doing like things that they would perhaps never do because they're so indoctrinated. But I want to ask you, like, comparing Scientology to other cults like Nixium, and then you get Hillsong, which has also been in the media like a lot lately. What are some of the similarities? And then we can discuss Nixium a bit later.
So I think, like, in general, cults have a structure, you know, the main person on top and then the people, it filters down. So I think cults in general have that structure, and that's why they become cults, you know, the person at the very top. I think I did make some notes on this. There's actually is a paper on specifically Scientology and Nixium, like the comparison. It's in a journal. I have it written down. International Journal of Coercion, Abuse and Manipulation. That's the journal. So if you want to read more on that, there's like an in-depth article. And I think also language is very important in cults. Like, for example, Scientology uses suppressive persons. That's someone that's against you or against Scientology, the us versus them mentality. Nixium has things called suppressives, literally exactly, you know, same language used, and language is also big in psychology. So cults leaders essentially know how to use psychology. And also, sorry, I do have it written down. One of Scientology's like main things is to clear the planet, clear yourself of thetans, and Nixium is purge yourself of parasites, which is also very similar terminology that they use. And they actually think that Keith Rainier, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, the, like, if you will, CEO of Nixium, was actually very influenced by Scientology. Nixium only came like quite a few years later, like 1998 it was founded, and only disbanded in like 2021, so over 20 years. And by then Scientology was already established, so he obviously kind of saw the structure and how successful they had been. And I mean, they are successful if you think about it. They're still kind of running. They've gotten away with tax evasion. They still have members and, you know, all that thing. So I think, like, in that instance, he learned from another cult, and that's why there's so many similarities between it. And if you look at like religious cults as well, they also have that kind of structure. They would also use the same kind of language of like cleansing yourself of sins, for example, that kind of thing, of even materialistic needs and wants. Like, you shouldn't need anything else besides this cult and what it can like provide for you. So I think it's very interesting that there's a lot of overlap between the different cults, and especially if they are kind of getting ideas from each other as well, which is kind of scary to think about. So yeah, I just think they employ the same tactics, a lot of fear. They also, in the very beginnings, use something called love bombing, which is like, you know, making you feel special, making you feel wanted, making you feel needed and special, and I like, you know, that kind of thing. And then it will just kind of flip eventually after they've made you feel this way. And because you so kind of like have hearts in your eyes, if you will, when the things start changing, you kind of now put it on yourself, like, well, I must be the bad person, I must be not worthy, and like I need to prove myself, which is why they take these punishments. And you would think like, this is slavery, why would I ever agree to this? But I mean, their sense of self is so broken down. That's another thing, is that they try to like strip you of your identity. and then try to build you up, and your identity is now this cult or religion or whatever you're involved in. So it's very interesting. There's lots of similarities. I feel like you could kind of write an article and interchange NXIVM and Scientology and whatever, and it would be very, it's just a general overlap. Obviously, there's nuances within each different one. Like religious cults would more target like the working class or even poorer societies. With someone like Scientology or NXIVM, it's more influential people and money. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, like I'm not too sure if you're familiar with like the Manson family and like Charles Manson, but yeah, he also recruited women.
Yeah.
And it was like almost in like a sex cult in a way too, because they were like on LSD. Like you're familiar with it. Can you like speak a bit about it?
So yeah, Charles Manson is another fascinating documentary recently done by Peter Dinklage. For those of you who have Netflix, it's how to become a cult leader or something like that. They speak specifically about Marilyn Manson and how not Marilyn Manson, Charles Manson, different cult leader. He spent time in jail and read books.
He wanted to be an actor, I think.
Yes, I think so. And then he was in jail for some sort of petty crime in Washington State, which is just north of California. And then when he was let out, he had read the book how to speak to successful people or something like that. So like self-help sort of has this influence in this. And then he basically told people, these women who were mostly vulnerable women who had in the 1960s migrated to California. There was a large migration of Americans to California during the 1960s, especially young people. And he then in Haight Street, Ashbury, which is an area of San Francisco where there was a large what was called then hippie community, he was then able to indoctrinate these people, often using LSD. And there's a very weird correlation because there was a doctor, I can't remember his name now, who had links to the federal government and the Central Intelligence Agency, who we're quite certain has links to Charles Manson, and especially his use of LSD, which he then used with these girls. I wouldn't go as far. I think it would be. I personally don't think that solely LSD and solely Charles Manson is the reason why these women went to Hollywood Hills and murdered Sharon Tate and her baby. But I think that there are elements of their responsibility, but also elements of vulnerability which are taken advantage of by Charles Manson. And also, I mean, there was in the 1960s, America was also an insane time. With presidents were being assassinated, the Vietnam War was occurring, civil rights was occurring. So if you're in this, there are societal issues, I think, which he took advantage of in these women.
Yeah, it's just fascinating because if you think about like Charles Manson, NXIVM, Scientology, like what you were discussing about how they take your, like people with low self-esteem, or they prey on your vulnerability, like you mentioned, it's all like a tactic to manipulate you. And even the questions that Miscavige tends to ask in an auditing session, it's like trying to pinpoint where can they take advantage or offer their help as a way to like manipulate you and like bring you in, which is like super fascinating because like I have a women empowerment brand, which is crazy because what you are trying to help people is supposed to be helping people is to boost their confidence, to show them like what they're capable of doing, but these people almost use it as a way to control them and for their own agenda essentially. So yeah, it's just crazy. But the last question I wanted to ask you, Demi, was what makes people gravitate towards Scientology or cults, like specific, like what do you think what pulls them in?
So I think people that are most attracted to like cults and these firstly, they don't view it as a cult at first. They wouldn't, cult has a very negative connotation, so you wouldn't join these things if you thought that they were a cult. But again, it's people that often are very vulnerable. They're looking for answers. They're looking for comfort is a big one. Same with religion. It can be just a form of comfort, of understanding, just wanting to feel like you understand yourself, why you're in this situation. And things like Scientology, again, it's very much self-help. So a person that's very secure, that's very wealthy maybe, or has a very good support system or family and whatever, wouldn't very likely join a cult. It would be very difficult for someone like that to kind of feel that a cult would give them things that they couldn't give themselves. So yeah, I just think when they hear like celebrities, for example, saying like, oh, it changed my life, it gave me my career, like they really helped me improve myself, and maybe you've tried all these things, maybe you were going to church every Sunday and, you know, these kind of things, reading self-help books, but nothing was sticking, and they feel like, okay, this thing is going to stick, this is going to help me. And just, you know, it all starts as just a way to improve yourself and improve your life and those around you, and feel like you have a purpose and a goal and a mission and whatever. So I think it normally starts with some type of thing that's lacking in your life. Like when I looked at what kind of people, are within cults. It's people with low self-esteem are more easily influenced. Like we said, again, women are more likely to join, and just people who have also experienced a big trauma, like losing a job, losing a loved one, that kind of thing. They might look for what's the word I'm trying to use, like a not so common way to look at something. Like a lot of people would turn to religion and whatever. They might look for can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, like something completely different, not heard of, not common, that they think like, this is the only thing that's going to help me, nothing else has helped me. Almost unorthodox method, I guess, which we would see Scientology as that kind of thing, and it's almost maybe even a last resort for some people. So yeah, I think that plays a big role. It's people that have some sort of vulnerability that would most likely get recruited, or even just blindly go in, you know, without even needing recruitment. So yeah.
Okay, so to end off, I just wanted to get like your last opinion on how would you advise someone from your perspective how to, you know, be aware of certain like organizations and institutions that maybe look appealing but might not be like the best thing to like get involved in. So like, for example, Scientology. So like, what would you advise someone to be aware of, basically?
So, sorry, just to go back, it was Dr. Jolyon West, who worked for the federal government, that was in touch with. Sorry, just as a reference for first. So I think what informs me, so I do not have a belief in the supernatural. I don't believe in God or ghosts or thetans or any of this. That's not that I then think that these people who do believe in that are wrong or whatever. That's up to them. The supernatural is not something I can understand. So if they understand it, that's, you know, that's valid. I think the three quotes by philosophers that inform me on this, not sort of why this occurs, is Sigmund Freud, the father of psychiatry, said that you will always have religion as long as you're scared of being dead, of dying. You know, people are scared of dying, and that's never really going to go away. Karl Marx, who is an economic philosopher from Germany, also said that religion is the opium of the masses. And what he means by that is often misconstrued. Opium at the time when he said it was a medication for pain relief, which he suffered from. So he used opium to relieve his pain. So he was saying it in that way, that religion is a way for the masses, which is the sort of working class, if he was determining, is saying that if religion soothes sort of the pains and the alienation of the system. And then probably the one that best sums up why people go for cults is by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said that we have God is dead and we have killed him. So in that, if there is no more, if in the age of modernity it's harder for our ancestors 1,000 years ago to just accept that they are gods and they inform our lives and so on, God or gods, which is what they believed, and there was very little sort of discussion about that. It was sort of accepted because it was hard for us to explain natural phenomenon and things that were happening in the world, lightning and whatever. So we would go for that, which is natural and not wrong. But now that we have these explanations, why does lightning occur? Why are there volcanoes? That's what he means by we've killed God, because we don't need him anymore. We don't need him for that sort of explanation. And Nietzsche's point is, if we've killed him, then what are we going to replace him with? And that's where you get these things like Scientology. That's what Demi said. It's a novel thing. Scientology is the same story, at least, as what is in the book of Genesis, or what is, in other creation stories that are in religion, in Greek mythology, for instance. It's similar. It has some similarities, and I think he did that on purpose. And that is because it fills that sort of void. Because if there is no God and there's no determined thing and there's no guy looking out for you, which is something that like a lot of people need, then what is there? And that's where you have Scientology, and also political things that come in there, societal issues will come in there, becomes religion, as well as radical atheism, which was something that came in the sort of mid-2000s, where it was just an insane backlash against religion, which I don't agree with either, because it's like, oh well, what are you accomplishing really? And I mean, I think that the world, that 10 years later we can now see what that conclusion was, where no one believes anything. And Scientology sort of innovated that, where you can say whatever you want. How are you going to know? I can lie. How are you going to check? That sort of, that media literacy. I would say media literacy is really if you, like Demi says, in the Scientologists would stop. You can't look at other things that are bad.
Okay, so I want to hear from you, Demi. What's your final words regarding like cults, and also how to be more aware of the fact that how easy it is to get involved in one without you even knowing?
So, like Adrian mentioned, media literacy is like a big issue. Just in general, if you look at how people trust like Facebook news and all of that kind of stuff. So I think like getting involved in a cult, people don't have media literacy. They don't have, I don't want to say critical thinking, but when you get a piece of information, you need to ask why, or find things that maybe go against it. There's things like confirmation bias, where you'll only read things that confirm your beliefs. So I think to prevent yourself from getting into these kind of situations is just really looking at the media that's presented to you, looking at facts that are presented to you, like how you spoke about you used to watch E-News, and like you would just take whatever they said, and then you started questioning, but why, looking at those kind of things. So when I also looked up Spanky Taylor and that first research or search,
freedom.org.
Yes, like if I didn't have critical thinking or media literacy from whatever, I would have just accepted that and been like, oh, okay, yeah, she's bad or whatever. So you need to look at opposing sources before you sign up for things, or start paying for courses and all of that kind of thing. Where did they get their sources from? Because they will give you like a whole mission statement and all of these things, and obviously people within the organization are going to have good things to say about it. And a lot of the people in Scientology, that they were like, we started reading articles against Scientology, and that started opening up like their ideas and thinking like, okay, this can't be right. I didn't know that they were saying these things and that this was going on, because it was so suppressed. So yeah, I just think it's good to be aware. I don't think cults are as prevalent these days. A lot of them have been around already for very, very long. I think it's very difficult for new cults. I don't really know any very recent cults that aren't like maybe religious, that have come up to the extent of like Scientology or Nixium, because I think people now do have more media literacy than back then. I mean, media and everything, mass communication was only coming around middle of the 90s and whatever. So people didn't have media literacy because they didn't have the sources that we have these days. So yeah, I think it's just good to always question, even if you are religious and you do go to church every day. Like, I know you're not supposed to question the Bible and all of that, but it's good to still do your own research, use your own thinking, critical thinking. Don't just take the word from anybody, so yeah, just be aware of that and the complications that can come with just following blindly.
Yeah, I love that. I think that was really well said. Like, I agree with you. I feel like if you learn to question things, and I also urge you to like empower yourself, because when you feel more empowered and more confident in like yourself, you're not easily swayed by like certain things. And I think that like, because when I was younger, I obviously wanted to be an actress, so I did drama and all of that, and I was so fascinated with like Hollywood and the film industry. And then like lately, as I've gotten older, I've actually lost respect for that institution, because it's almost used as a way to cover up certain things in the world that's going on. And I think that once you start reading things and educating yourself and asking questions, I feel like you'll start opening your mind up to what's really happening, and yeah, you can protect yourself more. So I really urge you guys to do that. But thank you guys so much for joining me. It's been like such a pleasure to have you on, and yeah, hopefully we can do more episodes together. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Okay guys, so that's it for this week. I wish everyone a happy week, and yeah, peace out.